Let's get the first of our Ask the Five in, which is from Fergus.
I just watched the whole of Adolescence, and it's harrowing. It's brilliant acting. As an ex-actor, I think I'm allowed to say that. It's incredible, but it's very powerful. And the idea of Keir Starmer to put it to young white boys in schools, I think it's horrifying. It's mega X Factor. All it would do was horrify them about some boy who maybe did or didn't kill somebody. And yes, show it to parents, okay, of all races, not just white. So what does the team think is the right thing that should be done with this incredibly powerful series of films?
Yeah, thank you so much for your message, Fergus. I'm just going to start on this because I feel really passionately about this topic, and I'm sure some of you on the panel do. But I feel that young white men in this country are the most targeted group of people, the most vilified, and clearly, by all the statistics, the most forgotten. There's no DEI crusader coming for them, is there, Will?
No, there's not. This reminds me when I was in Year 10, the Christian Studies class I was in put on an interview with Ted Bundy in his final level interview before being executed as a lesson for us not to watch pornography. And I think this is a similar case of them trying to find the wrong role models to try and teach lessons. I just think I'm with Fergus on this one.
What do you think?
I don't think anything should be done with this other than people should use their own free will to watch this drama, because that's what it is. It's not a documentary. If they want to, I don't think it should be put out there as something that is a lesson for people. I don't think it should be shown in schools, and I certainly don't think our Prime Minister should be standing up at his box at PMQ's Question Time and talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, Kai, this is ridiculous, isn't it? The Prime Minister is up at PMQ's talking. I mean, he knew that question was coming because that's how PMQ's works when it's a Labour person asking it. He knew what he was going to say. How is the Prime Minister using British taxpayers' time and important questions to him to talk about a drama on Netflix?
Well, having watched the whole thing, actually, it's quite ironic because one of the things that they talk about in the show is how schools are a bit run down and how they're just showing films all the time, and that's a bad thing. So actually, his advisors should have actually watched the 4 episodes. But it shouldn't be shown at school, but I think it is. We should champion it because it's an amazing example of brilliant British acting, tackling really hard topics, brilliant film industry. Those are brilliant.
You mustn't blame
and it's not a race.
Should we champion 3 Girls then? Should that be shown in schools?
I don't know.
3 Girls is the true story. It was a documentary about 3 girls who were raped continuously by grooming gangs in Rochdale.
Based on the Maggie Oliver book.
Showing films and documentaries in school.
Right.
But Harrison, what do you make of all this?
I mean, as an actual show, I didn't rate it. I mean, regardless of all the undertone stuff, I actually just didn't find it that... I mean, I think it started really well. I thought, oh, wow, we're straight into the action. I just thought it kind of fizzled out. One thing I thought was clever about it was all one continuous shot per episode, which was quite clever, you know. But I agree. I think, unfortunately, you can't help but think that this film was created to have some sort of social impact and conversation, which it has. And if it's based on that, then you've got to admit, then why wouldn't they base it on, you know, real-life events? Sorry.
No, you are right. I think they did have some sort of a big political issue they wanted to highlight. It wasn't race. It was all the other topics that this tackles. Masculinity, internet culture, the manosphere and the difficulty of being a young white working class boy in the UK.
Do you think
those conversations could have happened.
Do you know what it is
and
for me?
It's been made into something.
Do you know what it is for me? Particularly, the important thing is that we if we're going to make a drama that's so impactful, going to be seen by millions of people, that we try to have some accuracy to it, or at least do justice by the many young white boys who are struggling, who aren't going to commit violent crimes, and show them and their plight, the ones who have to work their backsides off just to get a pittance in this country. We don't talk about them, but we do talk about them as soon as it's politically convenient. Labour, who have completely neglected the working class in this country since Tony Blair was in office, now all of a sudden seems to care when a Netflix documentary comes out on it. That's what winds me up.
Alex, it's not just about accuracy, it's also because it's lazy. It's lazy because it's ignoring the real problems that go into the sorts of violence that the show wants to portray. Yeah. Culture is obviously a huge problem. Integration from members of the community who have come from first or second generation migrant families. This is all obviously a massive part of this problem, but that's too politically sensitive, so they didn't touch it. That's what annoys me.
And don't forget, yes, we've just had, what's his name, Clifford, kill Hunt's daughters and wives, which was absolutely appalling, and apparently watched Tate the night before. But you know what? If I went and watched an Andrew Tate video now, I wouldn't go out and kill someone with a crossbow.
It's the type of audience that's watching it. It's the vulnerable kind of those who maybe feel a bit outcast by society, which in fairness that did highlight in that those who maybe feel who are bullied or that feel like society have turned their back on it. Those are the vulnerable ones that people like Andrew Tate can be dangerous for because they're so impressionable.
But we're not talking about parenting, are we?
So it would have escaped your attention that the blockbuster Netflix show Adolescence has been causing waves. Now, it's a searing account of a boy sucked into the so-called manosphere, and it covers really important topics about masculinity, violence, and internet culture. Now, I binged it in one go. I thought it was absolutely incredible. Reviewers are calling it a once-in-a-generation show. So why does the right wing decide to ruin it and ruin amazing television by making this all about their imagined culture war? They're getting angry because the main character was a young white boy. Now, yes, working-class white boys have been vilified in recent years, and it's only right that we tackle that. But this is a television show, and the right wing weaponising that to make it all about their agenda of division and hate is completely wrong. But I'm sure the panel will disagree. Why does it always have to be about weaponising culture? It's a television show, Alex.
Really, listen, I was one of those white working class boys who was completely forgotten about by successive governments, and every 100 of me who managed to get out of that cycle are vilified, demonised, and left behind by successive politicians, by successive governments. And quite frankly, to then peddle this nonsense on Netflix when so constantly they are swapping out races, swapping out genders, for this, that and the other, and then to pin it on young white boys is just taking that even farther. What they're trying to do is demonise them as terrorist, misogynistic young men who go out and stab people. The facts do not support what Netflix is portraying. And this is what's enraging so many working class people in this country. Once again, they are at the butt of a joke by the liberal media elites. It's ridiculous.
I agree with you, and I found your tweeting about this actually very powerful. And I agree that white working class boys have been ignored, and actually importing the DEI sort of framework from the US into the UK never worked because actually class is one of the biggest determinants of life success in this country. And we'll talk about that later when we talk about things like private education. Yep. I agree with you on that. But there's been plenty of shows showing about drugs and knife crime with black people.
I'm
nonsense.
Glad you said that.
There are plenty of those shows.
Can I give you some examples? So Coronation Street did a whole programme on grooming gangs. They were white. Spooks they were hunting down some terrorists. They were from a white evangelical church. Starmer stood up in our parliament this week and called it a documentary. It's not a documentary, it's fiction.
Absolutely.
He actually said it should be shown in schools. Well, why should we show it in schools? Because it's not real events. Perhaps we should show real events, like documentaries about the sexual predators in our society in schools. We have to stop painting our white boys as privileged, but also toxic.
Well, look, I mean, I really do think this is typical liberal elites trying to frame the topic in a way that they can easily talk about. Because let's face it, if they framed this as a young black boy, for example, there'd be outrage, wouldn't there?
Yeah, that wouldn't happen in a million years. And I'd be less worried if this was just yet another example of the liberal media talking down to the white working class. But there are consequences because we've got a moronic Labor government that are now using this to try and inform policy decisions. They're forcing schools to watch this, they're going to put it on in Parliament, and they're laying the blame at people like Andrew Tate or porn or all the wrong reasons, as opposed to having proper conversations around culture, around ethnicity and around families, which is where the problems lie.
Yes, just a clarification for the audience. Keir Starmer did correct his comments about that being a documentary. But you may argue the damage was already done. Harrison, what's your take on this? You're a young man. What do you think about what's happening to? Yes, yeah, well, exactly. What do you think is happening? Because I don't think you can put this down just to people like Andrew Tate. I think this is because of decades of neglect, and this is going back, 30, 40 years, in my opinion.
Saying Andrew Tate is lazy, right? Yeah. I'll be honest. Some of the stuff he says won't have a positive influence, right? But it's not just TV. I don't remember the horrific events that we saw in Nottingham with that horrific attacker. Yes. Nottingham's police put a photo on Twitter, a stock image of a white arm being arrested. right? They then deleted that tweet. It's weird. I mean, it goes both ways. It's if something was, a crime was committed by predominantly white people, and then they got a black person to portray it, I'd find that odd.
Yeah.
So I think it goes both ways, and I think the point to highlight white working class boys are they perform the worst at school, the least likely to go to university, and it's almost like, but they'll be okay. There's so many, plans to go for leadership programs and all this sort of stuff if you're from an ethnic background, if you're a woman. But if you're a white working class lad, there's not much you can actually grapple onto.
I completely agree with you, but these are two different issues. Renee, you said it yourself. It's fiction. It's a TV show.
Why would we show it in
It's
schools,
been incredibly
then?
successful. And we shouldn't. Obviously, we shouldn't be doing that. But there's we can trade shows as much as we like. There's Gangs of London, Top Boy, plenty of shows.
Top Boy was excellent and did show black violence in
Exactly. But so how can you, on the one hand, say, oh, this is endemic, that we're always blaming white people, when there's plenty of other shows that you can point to? This is just the right wing selectively getting angry about fiction to serve their agenda. And it just gets people angrier, more divisive, just creates more hate in our society. And I think that's wrong.
Well, the problem I've got with it is I don't feel like it's being portrayed as a drama. It's clearly based on some sort of truth that's happening, hence the reason why politicians are inviting drama TV stars to talk in Parliament. Why are they not talking to actual experts?
Yeah, and this is also the case when you hear people like Stephen Graham and the creator of the show say things like, we wanted to create something that felt true, we wanted to create something that was meaningful. They are not putting this forward as popcorn entertainment, they're putting this forward as social commentary, and as a result of that, you need to take into account the way that they are casting the main perpetrator.
For me, the sadness of this is that Andrew Tate is vile, and, so is the online porn that all of our kids, whatever colour, are subject to now, probably by the age of 10. What we should be doing is not actually even looking at the Andrew Tates of the world. We should be asking why. Why are our young boys being drawn to people like Andrew Tate? And then, once we have the answers to that, sort it.
Harrison, I just want to ask you, because, a lot of the criticism is falling, people like Gareth Southgate is saying there's not enough strong male leaders in society. Do you think that's the reason why young people are sort of up in arms these days? There's a mental health crisis in the country. Do you think it's because
I think it's a huge part of it. The problem is, when you don't have anybody to look up to, there's a vacuum. And the people that fill that vacuum are people like Andrew Tate, which really shouldn't be there, to be honest, right? Especially people who aren't able to watch that and think, oh, I can clearly tell he's saying a joke. Some people who take it literally, those who are impressionable, that's really dangerous, right? So you need to have that vacuum filled by, I actually think Gareth Southgate is a good person to look up to. We need to have male role models in that sense, and that's why I actually think someone called on there to be a minister for men, which I think is extremely important, because men have been underperforming, and young boys do need someone to look up to, positive role models, and absolutely father figures is a huge thing as well.
And we need to be able to say it.
Final word to you on this, Kai. Do you think there's enough masculine role models that have positive sort of impacts on young people? Because a lot of the time the left are telling young people to demasculinize and feminize. Do you think that there's enough strong masculine men to look up to?
No, I don't. And this show could have been a really good opportunity to talk about some of those issues, about internet culture, which has sucked so many people into this sort of spiral. It's causing massive troubles for this generation of kids. We could have talked about the crisis of masculinity. Making this about race and making this about dividing people just means that we don't get to move on to those really serious topics.
OK. Well, I just think we should leave white working class boys alone, frankly.